Hello and welcome to another episode of Our Own Devices. This time we are going to talk about a very interesting concept, which is on how to use generative AI as a digital public good. And in a country like India, that sort of opens up a lot of opportunities. To talk about it is a very familiar face in the Indian tech scene, Mr. Jaspreet Bindra, who is now the founder of Tech Whisperer. So Jaspreet, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Nandu. Great to be here, and I look forward to our conversation.
And for the benefit of the listeners, that introduction was very short, and that's also because you can introduce Jaspreet in many different ways, and it can be a very long introduction. So I guess we'll go directly into the point. So Jaspreet, generative AI is being thought of in many different scenarios, but your concept of using it primarily in a country like India as something that that is transformational, right? So if you could just explain that concept a little bit.
No, thanks, Nandu. And this is like my big passion and my big area of evangelism in a sense right now, as to how India can create a model for generative AI to lead the world. It really comes from three places. One is, as generative AI and AI have taken hold, US and China have clearly emerged as the two big powers in it, and they have their own models, to propagate it. Secondly, India has obviously had a very successful story in digital public infrastructure, being treated as a digital public good. So things like UPI Aadhaar, built at scale for more than 1 billion people, offered to you free, has completely transformed the way we do pretty much everything. It's the digital transformation of a country. And then the third bit is, in my last 2 years, I was doing a master's in AI and ethics at Cambridge University. And again, we were grappling with how countries like India can have their own kinds of ethical rules, guidelines, basis our culture and our society on AI. And a combination of these three gave me and a few of us this idea that we should look at generative AI in India, or Gen AI, is what I call Jan AI. Okay, so Jan is obviously for Janta people. And Jan AI really is very simple yet audacious, that offer generative AI to 1.4 billion Indians as a digital public good, the same way that we offered payments, identity, commerce, etc., and transformed them. And what it entails really are two things, and I'll keep that at a high level. One, build your own India Bharat LLM, large language model, which many people are speaking about, with your own context, data, culture, language, etc. But importantly, take this LLM and in some way create it as a layer in the India stack, which has given us all this digital public infrastructure and goods, and offer this to Indians to kickstart the whole creative economy, entrepreneurship, and multiple other things. That's the Jan AI concept, Nandu.
It is not that easy also, right? Because you have to literally do it ground up, because whatever you have with the chat GPTs and of the world is also heavily biased towards their context. And we need to create something which is positively biased to our context, our problems, understands it's also very complex. India itself is so complex, right? So how do you think that goes about? Is it going to be a government driven kind of a thing, or because you have so many Indian companies already working in this space, do they all come together and sort of contribute to something like that?
Well, big transformational ideas are never simple. When India created the digital public infrastructure, and which we are so familiar with today, it was a massive, huge, complex exercise over many years, with lots of money being, lots of investment going in, etc. The good news is that we know how to do it. We've done this successfully, and so we know how to do it. Now, what does it take? Really, four things. Okay, number one is that you need data. And that is probably the most important part. And think about it this way. If you take all Doordarshan recordings till now, take all India recordings till now in all the languages, take all BBC Hindi, etc. recordings till now, take every newspaper publication published in India, etc., etc. Most of these are available in a digitized manner. And you will actually have the data sets available, okay, along with other ones which are there, like Bhashini, which is a language data set available already. So in many ways, while it's still difficult to get all the data together, a lot of it is available. That's number one. Second is the compute power, the investment in compute that will go into it with all the GPUs, which we keep on hearing about. Well, already, as you've said, few private sector companies have signed up with NVIDIA. Mr. Chandrasekhar is talking about getting 25,000 GPUs into India for, a test bed kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so, and frankly, what is going to happen to GPU costs is that a year from now, probably those costs are going to be half of what they are today. 2 years from now, they're probably going to be 10% of what they are today.
Yes.
So it isn't as big a cost that we think. Third is talent, which we know we have. So I'm not going to dwell on that too much. And the fourth, most important, Nandu, is the partnership and the governance structure. This has to be much like DPI, has to be a government, private sector, and academia partnership, which got created. And then we had the right governance bodies like NPCI, UIDAI, ONDC, etc., which kind of then made sure that this worked in a great public-private academic partnership manner. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. These governance structures already exist, okay? And we just need to use that knowledge and create perhaps another governance structure which will do this and add on to the India stack and offer GenAI as a digital public good.
A lot of the structure, as you said, is already there. We just need to start using that for something new, right?
That's right. Well, it might be simplifying it too much in that sense. But what I'm trying to say is that, we're not a country where we have not done this before. In fact, we're the only country in the world which has done this before. Okay, we know how to create public infrastructure at scale and offer it with the right governance as a digital public good. And so for us to do something like this is much, much easier than for any other country to do it. And then I also spoke about the data and the talent and the other missing pieces of it in that sense. And therefore, creating a body which does this, obviously under the sponsorship of the government, much like, Mr. Nilekani did and his team did the entire DBS area, I think is much easier to do for us.
So this collective intelligence sort of, of India, that, as you said, like, millions of hours of TV, audio, all of that. But it also comes with the added layer of complexity of language, right? And it's not in one language, as India is. So is that a good thing? Because, in a way, this entire Gen AI space could get supercharged because of this new complexity that's coming in. It's solving a big problem and maybe solving it for the world.
Oh, absolutely. So the complexity is a problem and an opportunity. Okay. Now, again, let me give you, and the Doordarshan All India Radio thing I said were just a couple of the massive other
small
data sets
examples.
Small example. But let me give you another small example. Land in every part of India is measured in a different way. It's not standardized too. There are bighas and there are canals and there are,
Marla.
And so, if you have like a chat GPT, which is trained on a, largely Western database, it's useless for most Indians or Indian, let's say the Indian farmer or whatever. And so there are these complexities, okay, which are there. And then there's obviously language, 25 almost official languages, hundreds of thousands of dialects. And it's going to take time to kind of, bring them in, etc. But once you have that, think about the benefits. And let me just throw again 3 quick benefits at you. Okay? You might have been exposed to an app called Jugalbandi, which was, which has been created by Microsoft, ThoughtWorks, and a couple of other partners on generative AI, which has actually Satya Nadella himself kind of put it out on LinkedIn, etc., because he was thrilled with it. It basically is a generative AI-based app which can tell any poor, underprivileged Indian about the schemes available for her. If she's an 80-year-old widow living in Bihar somewhere, she doesn't know there are 300, 500 government schemes. So in her natural language, she can ask an app, I'm so and so and so, mere liye kya hai, what is available for me? And, it kind of, then you interact. it's back in that language, etc., etc. Now, that has been big, but think of Jugalbandi for healthcare. Think of Jugalbandi for education. Think of Jugalbandi for legal rights. Think of Jugalbandi for land records, for agriculture. So it's a massive public infrastructure, and it's all built on generative AI with languages and local context. Number two, so much unemployment in the country. A lot of people actually can become entrepreneurs through the creator economy. And we know what that, how big that is with the whole, with the whole YouTube, etc., etc. And if you have a Bharat LLM Indian generative AI available, much as simple as a Paytm or any other app available on UPI, you have the potential to create, well, tens of millions of creators plugged into the global creator economy. And I'm not even talking of normal entrepreneurship, which will get created tens of thousands of startups, which the UPI created for us in India. And similarly, and third and final is, the way Indian companies, as well as big tech and foreign companies, have leveraged the India stack, to build products on top of UPI, on top of like GPay, for example. I mean, there's the third piece of it, which will get created by the large companies once you have that as a part of the India stack. So I think it's the effect and the ROIs, therefore, are as transformational as they were when the original DPI was put out.
Interesting point to segue into the next question that I had. So do you think big companies like Microsoft and Google, which have already done a little bit of this work, I know, for instance, Google is working on sort of digitizing a lot of the smaller languages in India or dialects. And as you mentioned, Microsoft is working on connecting the dots between people and products in the government side. So do you think these guys will also play a part in this larger, Indian Gen AI concept?
It's a good question. And think of it this way. Suppose Gen AI was there, okay? It's much like when UPI has been there in India for a long time, right? For a few years. Now, when a company comes in, say when Meta came in or when Google came in, they're not going to create their own payment infrastructure in this country. Google never created a payment infrastructure. Meta never did. They have ridden on top of the payment infrastructure already created. How has this payment infrastructure been created? I mean, it's been created, yes, with government support, but it's actually, working with these tech titans as well as the local Indian software services firms. A lot of Indian companies as well as global companies have contributed to build this digital public infrastructure stack. Okay. And similarly here, I mean, again, the model is there. The big tech and larger companies have actually learned how they can use this digital public infrastructure to build products on top, which make sense for them and, profit them. And so I think they, in my opinion, while they are doing their own thing and will continue to do their own thing, I think will be enthusiastic participants. Case in example, Amazon participating in ONDC.
Yes.
Okay, while Amazon obviously has a huge setup, it still thinks it makes sense to participate in an ONDC, which will link every Indian, which I don't think Amazon would be able to do, for a very, very long time. So for Gen AI, I do see that, I see that learning from how the industry leverage DPI. I'm sure that they will know, they will figure out and be enthusiastic in leveraging a Gen AI kind of concept also.
So on this concept, where are the conversations right now? Have you bounced it off the right people? Have you, in your circles, is there acceptance? How are you finding this? Is there some traction coming in?
Nandu, this really got introduced by a couple of us writing an op-ed in one of the leading English newspapers about a month back. Okay. And frankly, for a month since then, we've been doing two things. We've been testing the waters by talking to some more, let's say, more knowledgeable people than us, okay, and more prominent people than us. And secondly, frankly, talking to people like you, okay, to say that, look, what do you think? And it also helps spread out the word. And, it gets, so, I talk to you, this podcast goes out and, 20 more people kind of come to me and write to me saying that, this makes sense. This makes sense, but how will we tackle that, etc. So we are still kind of in a conceptual stage, okay, and an idea generation, idea testing stage in that sense. obviously it requires, much more work. We need to kind of go into the depth of it into terms of how the technology will really work, how much is the money required for this, etc. But again, very candidly, Jaspreet Bindra is not the kind of person who can kind of take this and, sponsor this and create this for the country.
Yeah.
We are looking
Yeah.
to see that if this idea resonates with, people at the right levels, people at the ministry, etc., who might see more. I mean, they either see merit on it or they don't. But we are heading that way. We are kind of building up a ground up kind of a support before we head, rather than just writing something and going to someone and saying that does it make sense or does it not make sense. We're still at that stage.
But it's an idea that should obviously resonate. I don't see anybody wanting to say, "Hey, we won't do it." But are you seeing any challenges ahead? Do you think there are obvious challenges to a concept like this?
Absolutely. And if there were no challenges, then I think it would have been a terrible idea. Okay,
Yeah.
because
Too easy to do.
Too easy and would not work. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, we do believe that it seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And frankly, we love the name. Okay, Jan AI, because
No, that's superb actually.
you need a catchy name, as you know, in today's
Yes.
environment for things to go ahead. And so we are obviously very positive about it. There are challenges. I mean, I think the challenges could be largely there are challenges which could be political, given the fact that we are at a situation where elections are coming, etc. And it might not, one might need to wait for something like that to happen before you kind of take it to people might be distracted. Okay, at this point of time, the challenges obviously are economic. Okay, there is a perception, and a lot of it is right today, that creating something like this would take tens of billions of dollars or billions of dollars. And if you cost this something like this at prices today, I think possibly that would be right. And so there's a whole lot of economic challenges, but we need to see that there, we could do a pilot which could be on an open source LLM already existing with some fine tuning. But though we do believe that we'll have to create something from scratch if it was really work. If it was to really work. And then the challenges are also in some sense infrastructural. Because even if people were to buy into something like this, I think the sheer amount of GPU and other infrastructure that would be required to build something like this is just not available in the world today. There's a base out there for whatever is the available infrastructure. People have bought most of it for the next. So there are these challenges, and certainly they exist. But I think that the benefits definitely outweigh the challenges.
Yeah. So if I can ask you one last question before winding up. So you mentioned that it needs to be built ground up, but the fact that others have done it in their own context, is that going to make it cheaper, easier to do? And is there a way to maybe piggyback on a little bit of what they have done so that we don't have to do everything ourselves?
It's a great question. I completely understand where you're coming from. Honestly, I'm not that well versed in this technology, which at the end of it is still a bleeding edge technology. Kind of take that call, and I think the next step is to work with some people to make those decisions. But there is that decision. So for example, as you said, people have already done it. So taking an example, Facebook has created, Meta has created an open source Llama, right? And that's open sourced. And there are other open source models like that. Okay. And so to take that open source model and create, fine tune it with some of Indian data and have something out is one option. I mean, it's ironic almost that a country like UAE, okay, a rich but very small country like the United Arab Emirates, actually has, while we've been talking in the last 2, 3, 4 months, have created 2 very large language models which are attuned to Arabic language, culture, etc., etc. And they've kind of really invested and done that. And so, but on the other side, therefore, on the other hand, we know that something like that is possible to do. If they could do it, I'm sure so could we. and so we do need to figure out what is the right architecture, what is the right way to do. And if I, from my little that I know and from my background, I would actually possibly do a POC, a proof of concept of some sense, using an existing open source model and try it out before, kind of building one's own. Even as I say that, on the other hand, I know that probably the idea is so powerful that it might make just sense to go skip the POC and go straight into building something else. But those things we need to detail, frankly.
I'm just hoping that our next conversation is going to happen soon, and it's going to happen soon in a post-Gen AI kind of a scenario where we are going to discuss, hey, we did it, now let's discuss the future of that. So fascinating. Thanks for being on the show, Jaspreet.
Thank you, Nandu. I won't wait that long. It's going to take long to build. So I'm sure we will have a conversation before that too. But I'm very confident that we will build something like this.
So you are listening to Jaspreet Bindra talk about his concept of Gen AI. And let's hope it's a concept all of us sort of, adapt and adopt. Till our next episode will be available everywhere you listen to your podcast.